Good afternoon everybody, and in this video I'm going to tell you how to quickly and easily paint this miniature base. In this video I'm using a Games Workshop 32mm base, but obviously these techniques could apply to any base that you fancy. I begin by putting a small amount of PVA or wood glue onto a surface which you don't mind getting ruined. In my case it's a really dirty old base which I sometimes use for drying my dry brush out. Next up, using a filthy, useless old brush, don't use a good one or you'll wreck it, apply the PVA evenly all over the top of the base. Try to avoid the rims on the side. You should end up with something a little like this. Next up, you're going to want some suitable texture for the surface of your base, and I've got this old pot of various grades of grit that I use. Hopefully your glue hasn't dried out by now and you can dip your base into your grit. Now sometimes you're lucky and you'll get a marvellous coat first time, but sometimes you get a little bit of grit around the rim of your base. Now just wipe this off with your fingers or your thumb. You're going to want to seal that texture onto your base so it doesn't just flake off. So we're using diluted PVA with water, and we're just going to dip the base in and knock off the excess. We'll try and shake out as many of those drips as we possibly can. And now for the boring bit, we have to wait for this to dry. You could perhaps use a drying enhancer like a hairdryer or something, but I prefer to leave it overnight. Now moving on to the painting, you're going to want to prime your base black. I've used an airbrush primer, but you can use any undercoat that you fancy. And you should end up with something that looks a little like this. First of all, we're going to use our brown paint. I'm using Vallejo Model Colour Flat Earth, but you could use any brown that looks similar. Make sure to give it a good shake. With your brown paint, do a heavy overbrush on the top of the base. The next step is to shade the base, and in this video we're going to be using Citadel's Agrax Earth Shade. Always make sure to give this one a really good shake. Apply the shade liberally to the base, but try not to add so much that it actually runs down the rims. We're going to go back to our original base coat of brown and give the base a dry brush over the shade. You should now have something that looks a little like this. You can see the contrast is starting to come out. The next step is to add a lighter colour. In this case I'm using Vallejo Model Colour Beige, and give the base a lighter dry brush. You should now have something that looks a little like this. I always try to concentrate my lighter dry brushes towards the edges of the base, just to give the inside a little more shadow. I'm going to go back to the brown again to paint the rim of the base, but you could paint your rim any colour you fancy, just make sure it matches the rest of your army. That rim really helps make the base look a lot more tidy, and you should now have something that looks a little like this. I always recommend using 2 or 3 thin coats to paint your rim to make it look really smooth. To finish the base off, we're going to give it a little grass tuft on the top. I still have a box of Citadel Mordheim turf laying around, so I'm going to use that, but there's plenty of these things on the market. Using a cocktail stick, I add a small blob of glue to the base where I want my grass tuft to sit. After the glue has dried, you'll be left with an easy, simple but good looking base for your miniatures. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, then please be sure to like and subscribe, or even leave a comment. I always try my best to reply to them all. You can even now support the channel by joining the Patreon page, details of which are in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.